All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Judd's room, Whitewave Trading Strategies. PAX groups in today, and we welcome back Ira Harris from Notes of the Underground fame. Okay. Good morning, Ira.
Good morning. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I mean that. Hopefully, I'll clean up my language. But it's kind of hard in today's world.
Yeah. Fuck that,
Ira. Yep. well said. Well said.
I'm sorry. Last week's conversation was great. I was on vacation with my family, so I listened to it, and I listened to part of it, and then I listened to. Oh, by the way, we're paid in crude. We remove our risk on 20 cents in the crude, so 59.37. Anyway, I listened to it as I was running on the beach. I love listening to podcasts or whatever, and I listened to that. That was one of the best conversations last week on China and the dollar and everything going on. I really one of the best. So thank you.
Thank you. Listen, it takes good questions, and Michael, who engaged, was a very in-depth discussion and very good. And he brought a lot of great points, which is what you want to hear rather than the self-created and narrative that gets spewed out. You know, I'm sitting and listening to it in the background here. I'm in the office, so I'm actually listening to it. It's such nonsense. But that's what makes it doable, and it's the interaction in this. You know, people just don't understand. But if you look at any successful trading operation, I don't care whether it's Kovner, Druckenmiller, Tudor, they all had times for discussions within their trading groups, because you got to beat out the ideas. You got to hammer them out. You know, the charts can show you this, and this, yes, and we know, in the famous words of somebody, that if you're right at the wrong time, you're wrong, which is what charts, as much as protecting you and allowing you to take small losses and know where your risk is, it will show you things, but sometimes you'll see it might be early, and the technicals will support the views that get hammered out. So that's really what you're speaking to, and I think we really, over the last 3 months that I've been doing it, 4 months where I show up, I think we've really hammered out some really good trades. By the way, the gold currency, too bad I'm a much better analyst than I am a trader. Otherwise, I'd be on the beach with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm glad that you're such a great analyst, because I caught a bunch of that gold, which sent us on the beach.
Oh, good, because that's what it's all about. All right. Are there any questions? So you guys direct the conversation where this wants to go, because Judd, you opened with the FLIR. I did, as you know, I bought it down at 29.20, but I've made money in there. I've lost money in there, looking for, because to me, it's still the last bastion of the infrastructure play that will come. And it may come out of this G20 meeting, because we know that the banks are, as the South China Morning Post talked about this morning, there was an article from Nicholas Sparrow, about it's now 13 trillion, the number of negative yielding bonds in the advanced, in the developed world economies. 13 trillion people who are buying bonds and paying the government, unless they go up in value, of course. You're not going to make any money, but you're paying the government basically for the ability to lend them money. Wow, what a great! You know what? It's like when I go into the bank now. When they because they pay you zero on your account, I walk in and I put up my hands when I go to the teller. Yeah, because that's what it is. There's so much theft going on. But of course, it gets washed out in other places because the equity markets are elevated, and there is other sides to this. But that's where I think there's going to be a lot of discussion. I know there's always a preliminary communique. I've been away for a few days myself in Galena, Illinois, playing golf with some friends of mine that go back to kindergarten. So it's a nice way to spend. So I've been reading, but I'm not as attentive as I should be. But I've read up to speed because I'm anticipating, and it's not necessarily in the trade from the G20. for those who really want a lot of risk, I said to Judd via email a couple of times I said, when Xi and Trump meet, you got to step back and say, what are possibilities? Well, I think one of the possibilities we may see out of this is that Xi makes a move to remove the tariffs on U.S. agricultural products. And I haven't blogged about it yet, but here's my thought process on it, is that the Chinese are worried that because of the weather patterns in the U.S., that this grain crop may fall significantly short of previous ones. And they're putting tariffs on the U.S. They were only able to do it because, of course, Latin America had record grain crops, and the U.S. has produced record grain crops. So there was huge supply, and China could afford to be to target certain things that would negatively, especially affect Trump. Because if we go back to this tariff discussion, I will ask you to recall that prior to the 2018 congressional elections, in a lot of rural areas, which are red states, Chinese government, Chinese firms paid for ads in local newspapers, talking about how terrible these tariffs were and how they're negatively affecting U.S. farmers. And that was then. But pay attention now, because China needs to feed its people first and foremost. And if they think that the U.S., and believe me, they're watching as everybody else, and we've seen corn run up. What's the run up in corn? About 33%, 34%. The beans have not nearly performed as well, but as Judd wrote about last night, the wheat is important. So they're worried that there may be diminished supply. And if they're worried about that, Xi can look like a good guy. Oh, we're removing the tariffs. But it's not really a good guy, because he's doing it for the benefit of China, which I certainly understand. It's not a comment about good or bad. It just is, but he has room to move there, and he can give Trump a victory. And at this juncture, Trump could use a victory, especially in those areas that really brought him to the White House, because the red states, which are certainly much more agriculturally based, the farmers are hurting at this juncture. And it's not to say that they won't be hurting, but at least the perception is, oh, we're not blowing China. Because the worst thing about the tariffs were not necessarily that China was buying less grain from the U.S. The important thing, and you can't forget this, is that the U.S. has been building, and U.S. farmers and the Soybean Association and the corn growers and cattlemen, they've been building this trade relationship for several decades. And that's what the tariffs, why they were terrible for the rural areas of the United States, because all this time and energy spent on those markets was being destroyed, especially because the Chinese can now go to Brazil, which is a bigger producer of certain grains than the U.S. And you don't want to do that. You spent all this time and goodwill building these relationships. And I think that's what some of the farm organizations were more angry about. Now, okay, we understand the political tool involved, but this is the harm that it's doing to us. So I'm looking for that. Now, if you're really looking, and I don't advise taking more risk than you're ever comfortable with, because tomorrow is also a grain report. So we get an interesting time here. We're going to get plantings, what the final plantings were, and as well as supply in storage. If you get a break in the grains tomorrow, I'd be looking at support levels to buy them. That report comes out at 11 o'clock Chicago time. You can express it, as Judge said, in options if you want, but I'm looking at that. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I buy them on a severe break because the numbers are more bearish and that the farmers were able to get more crops in the ground, well and good, but I'll buy it on a break. And if nothing comes out of the G20, okay, fine. But I do know in May that China bought more U.S. grain than they have in a long time. So I'm just, again, as I always caution, these are things to pay attention to, and nobody else is talking about them. But I know that they're out there, and I've also watched, and Judd and I have actually talked about this. is if you look at the ag stocks, they're telling you a different story anyway. They've actually performed pretty well. Well, I'm always on my charts. Let me take Bunge's down today. It's well off its recent highs. Let's take a look at it. It was above the 200-day. We're now below the 200-day in Bunge. It's dropped almost $3. Yeah, $3 off its recent high made a week and a half ago. So I'm very attentive to that.
Yeah, ADM had bad earnings yesterday. And they're steady right now.
Yeah. Okay. And you have to look at
ConAgra.
No.
Which one?
No, I watch NTR Nutrien, which is the old potash.
Yeah. Okay. There it is.
Okay, and that's had a nice move this month. So there are things that are signaling, that hey, something may be going on here, because he's not only because higher grain prices, which we know we have, but watch these. That's all I'm saying. Be attentive, because supposedly, from what I've read, especially last night and this morning, is that the Chinese were able to get Trump. The only reason Trump wanted a meeting with Xi because he wants the headline effect, and he had to agree. Now these are not anything that we're certain about. They're rumors emanating from certain, but some of them are from supposedly White House sources, that the Chinese wanted. The only reason they would allow, the only way that Xi would have a meeting is if Trump, agreed to back off from the 300 billion of new tariffs, and at 25%, and that he had promised, maybe 10%. So you're hearing different language, and of course they rolled out Fredo, otherwise known as Mnuchin. That's my new name for Steve Mnuchin, is Fredo, because to me, he's like when Michael Corleone says, "You're dead to me now," because Mnuchin's a nothing. He's literally a nothing, and even the Chinese, it's Lighthizer that they fear and Lighthizer that they respect. Steve Mnuchin he's a patsy for Wall Street. He's with Mo Green. You don't know who you're messing with. Wall Street is Mo Green, and that's who Mnuchin plays to. He's always the bearer of good news. Yeah, okay, and then Lighthizer has to come back and say, but supposedly it's been Lighthizer in conversations with Liu, and the Chinese have added some more power into their negotiating team. So, I don't know what to make of it. The market's already up. To me, the equity markets are up in anticipation of something, because why otherwise have a meeting when there was previously the discussion of no meeting? So I'm watching this very carefully, but I would watch the ag sector most importantly at this juncture, because already we had presidential debates last night. So we're already getting into the election cycle. It's the Chinese play this very well.
Yeah, you also have the Russell's trying to put an ORH day in right now. It's just got the stops above its yesterday's high. They really need above the 200-day to go anywhere. Hold on, I got the wrong one up. I got to put up a daily continuation. Yeah, and it's trading right back into its 200-day. So, the NASDAQ bonds are holding the 200-day. The Russell bonds are trying to get back above the averages. The S&P bonds, to me, are sideways. They're coming for all these transport names right now. CSX, FedEx.
KSU, I see is up.
KSU.
Yeah.
Good luck. I'm just not getting involved with its chase. KSU's breaking above its 50-day in the cloud. I mean, that actually looks pretty good.
Yeah, there are things, and yet now let me okay. So anybody want to discuss this further before we?
Yeah, and then here Mike's in right now from China. So Mike, if you want to unmute yourself and add anything, let's have it.
Hey, Michael, it's Pax.
He's Chinese in the U.S. Sorry, but if you want to come in, come on in.
Yeah, actually, Michael, I'm kind of wondering how everything is playing out, or how everything is being perceived, how this meeting is being perceived right now in Chinese media. I know you're here in the U.S., but you have a much better, clearer picture than certainly what I do.
Oh, so Michael, basically what we were doing was we were just talking about the grains. And how Ira was just, just talking out loud about if they were going to do something, it would have something to do with the grain tariffs. All right, can you unmute yourself, or you can't?
Yeah, I can talk for half an hour or so.
Okay, great. There you go.
I can listen for an hour.
So on Twitter, Hu Xijing, who's the mouthpiece for Chinese government, keeps pounding on Trump's stance before the G20 because Trump was still threatening the Chinese with another round of tariffs yesterday, and that got him a little unsettled. Let's put it that way. So I don't know. I really don't think there's any good outcomes gonna be out for this G20. Maybe they will walk away again, I think.
Yeah, well, it's
because
kind of
there's no
right
signal.
now, everybody's buying the chips like they're going out of style, thinking that something's going to happen.
I don't think anything's going to happen. No.
Yeah, well, I'm not getting involved in that.
Judd, why don't you reiterate for Michael what I said? I don't want
to. Ira was basically speaking about the fact that he thought that Trump needed a win and they were going to probably do something with the grains or the grain embargo.
Oh, that could possibly be done, but I don't think Trump's going to lift the $300 billion that's already being applied to the Chinese imports, and he certainly won't lift the technology ban exports to China. There's no bargaining chips on the table that the Chinese can offer to Trump unless that the Chinese are willing to put up a huge grains deal.
Michael, this is Ira. So that's what I was speaking to, because, the Chinese have to be concerned that the U.S. Crop this year is going to be way under predictions. The weather here has been abominable as far as too much rain. And tomorrow we get a number, the plantings number, the final, after all the insurance issues are carved out. And the Chinese, it would be in Xi's interest to do a big grain deal, because if the U.S. crop is, let's say, diminished by 20%, grain prices will go up much higher. So it's better for him to take the tariffs off and buy as much grain as possible now. Because Brazil still has, crop, because their harvest just came in a month and a half ago, and they finished with it, maybe still some going on. So that's what Xi could, it's really not giving anything to Trump because the Chinese need it.
Right.
So, right. I mean, that was my only point. It's dangerous because tomorrow we have the intention, the planting intentions finalized. So it'll be a volatile day in the grains. But my attitude was, if it breaks, I'd buy it, because that's the only thing that can come out of there. And then it would be Xi giving Trump a sense of victory, and he'd say, well, what are you giving me? But you got to give me something.
Right.
So that was the only point I was raising. So that's what Judd was getting you to respond to.
I think it's a good gesture I mean, to show the markets that they have both done something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good scenario out of this.
Ira, I'm going to take the other side.
That's what we're here for.
This is Angelo.
I am. Yep.
Unless everybody is talking about freaking grains and a China deal strictly for a trade, okay, then that's one thing. I focus on, the economic data, our models updated on a daily basis, a Bayesian inference. A trade deal with China ain't going to change shit, in my opinion. All right? It's not going to change the trajectory of the economic cycle or bend economic gravity, right? I mean, look at the Chinese data for the past 14 months, 18 months, right? So we're going to have to go through perdition's path first, in my opinion, meaning the cycle is just going to have to play itself out through the summer. And by the time
Angela, I don't disagree with a word you said. And this was just what would come out of there. I'm 100% agreement. I'm 100% agreement with you. 100%. And we'll get back.
Everybody's like, at the edge of their chairs, a trade deal, a trade deal, a trade deal. Like, what the fuck?
Hey,
let me read this article, this comment from another guy, so we can put that in too. So Tom says, I don't think the issue is the size and condition of the U.S. crop. It's the size and condition of other origins. China survived with other origin sources through the past year, so less important what happens with U.S. crop other than what will drive global prices.
Mm-hmm.
That's another opinion. I thought I'd throw it in there with you guys.
Again, but that's true. But if you're China, you cannot afford to be short of food supply. You cannot. It's the most pressing issue for China on a domestic basis. And if you think that the U.S., because again, grain is basically fungible, unless you want to argue genetically modified or not. But for the most part, around the world, grain is fungible. So I can buy beans from Brazil as well as buy them from the U.S., which was the point I made that the farmers are more irritated about because they were losing a market that they had spent decades building. Price is price. It is basically set internationally. Although last year, the Chinese paid a lot more for Brazilian beans than they could have in the U.S. just to make the point. And there was, huge demand for Brazilian beans. But the U.S. farmers eventually sold quite a bit, to other parts of the world, because if the Chinese buy all the Brazilian beans, then anybody else who needs beans has to come to the U.S. and they're not getting tariffed on it. So, okay. So that's certainly a fair point. But if I'm the Chinese political leadership, and I think Mike, I'll wait to hear from on this. They're concerned about all the people that have moved off the farms in China. The great movement, the great migration, as we call it in the United States, which was up from south and rural farms to the industrial heartland, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, that movement was real. Well, China's undergone massive movements, whole new cities built. If you think that political administration could take being short food, I'll take that bet all you want. So I'll leave it there and let Mike respond to that.
I agree. I agree with Ira. I mean, the migration from the countryside to the city, or the process of building more and more cities, it's devastating to the farmers or the agricultural output. It's detrimental.
Okay, so what if at the end of the weekend, Xi simply tells Trump, hey, look, you know what? We'll buy grains and stuff because we need food. In exchange, just don't put on any more tariffs, and we'll agree to keep on talking.
That's a win for both sides.
Exactly, I agree with Mike. It's a win for both. That would be ideal. That would be ideal. And then we'll go back to Angelo, which is, okay, now let the markets, make a decision. Are you, and I agree 100% with Angela. Do you think gold is up because of this Chinese tariff issue? Not a chance, because we saw that gold was actually going down when the stock market was in negative. Gold was not that haven. So gold is acting exactly the way I've discussed and others for many, many, many decades. It's a response to central banks. End of story. As soon as the Fed did that pivot and other banks, and Mario Draghi made that speech the day prior to the FOMC meeting, which set up Powell into a bad situation, gold has gone up, $70 to $80.
Ira, let me ask you a
I mean,
question.
Ira, we could finally be at that inflection point that the fiat currency bears have been bitching about for years and years, right?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure bitching about, but certainly making note of. And again, there's an article in the South China Morning Post this morning about 13 trillion of negative yielding bonds. Come on, are we really? If you're not in la la land, here again, I run these numbers 6 times a day. Germany, the 2-year note in Germany, the shots is negative 73 basis points. Please think about it. Negative 73.
Can I give you my money?
Yeah, I was talking with my friends yesterday. I said, hey, Germany 30-year mortgage is below 2%. And U.S. government bonds 30-year is what, 2.1, 2.2? And do you think German home buyers are more credit worthy than the U.S. government?
Yes.
Right?
That's a brilliant question. Brilliant question.
The German home buyers are more credit worthy than the U.S. government. Do they have their hands on some nuclear submarines or aircraft carriers? I don't know. It's
a very good point.
It's just crazy, right?
Ira, don't they have adjustable rate mortgages over there versus 30-year fixed in the U.S.?
Most of theirs are 10, by the way, 10 to 15. And let me tell you something else, because Mike brings up a good point, is firstly, Germany has the lowest percentage of home ownership of, I think, any developed country, because Germans are not prone to taking out debt. It's fact. They are not. There's the word for debt in German is also it corresponds to something like shame, or I'm not positive about that, but there is a word that, so it brings very serious issues. So the Germans have never leveraged themselves up, which is part of the problem of the ECB, because the Germans have a huge savings culture, just like, well, China has, it's being run down now, but the Japanese did too, which is why when people talk about, Japan and compare it to the U.S., you can't compare them. Japan went into its economic downturn with a huge pool of savings. Sorry, it doesn't exist in the United States. That's why I laugh, about German homeowners being a better credit than the United States. But Michael puts it in very power politic views, and that's of course the correct way to look at it. I'm tongue in cheek, but it's been an issue of mine, which is like 4 years ago. I actually worked on a project to put together a fund to buy German real estate, seeing that the outflow has to be that German real estate would go up, which it has. I just couldn't find a way to do it with anybody on the ground, and the returns that the people I was working with were generating in order to sell it to investors was 6 to 8%, and everybody who I brought it to said, no, this will never fly for me. And also, they weren't sure what a AAA net lease, on residential stuff meant, and commercial stuff in Germany. What applies in the United States does not always so cleanly, cross borders when you're making especially real estate investments. And I've learned that the hard way. But it is interesting. But if I'm a German citizen right now, I'm leveraging myself up, and they're starting to do it. So Michael's point is that, and home ownership and property ownership is growing. So debt is growing, because how stupid can I be? What do you really? Are you really going to put your money in Deutsche Bank and earn, negative 30 basis points, or they'll pay you 0 because they're allowed to? But that doesn't do anything for you. So this is why the Germans are really getting hurt. And it comes back to what we kind of joked about last week, which is, Draghi would say to him, again, the song from, what song did I cite? I have it written down because I don't want to, always, this is what Draghi tells the Germans. Always look on the bright side of life. It's like you're up on the, I love that from the Life of Brian, the, Monty Python, when there's 45 guys hanging up being crucified on the countryside in the movie, and of course it's tongue in cheek, and the Jesus figure says, "Hey, look on the bright side of life," and they start singing. That's what it's like. They're getting killed, but hey, just be happy. You got low unemployment, you got this and that, but for the brunt of people in Germany, they are getting financially repressed to the nth degree. This is the paradigm of financial repression. What they're doing, but they come back to them and say, "Don't worry, everything else is good. You got, trade is good. What happens when it's not good?" And the real result is that you have the growth of these more extreme parties on right and left growing, because people are. You can only be stupid for so long. You can only be stupid for so long, and then the pain of stupidity starts to bite, and you go, "No, this isn't for me." And I'm angry. And you know what? That's why you have Trump in the White House. You have Trump in the White House as a very good friend of mine, Kevin McCarthy, who's exceedingly bright in this realm and other realms, says, "You know what? The problem with the United States is that the elites, meaning in Washington and certainly in the banking industry, were never discredited in this economic downturn. In fact, they were just totally bailed out. And if you go even back to Roosevelt in the 30s, with all the bankers who went to jail and things that were closed down and wealth lost, those elites were discredited. And the failure to discredit the elites in the United States really has led to everything that everybody decries. And first and foremost is Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, the people in the rural communities, that strikes a big chord with them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's what goes back to why Michael and I agree on that grain, because Trump knows it. I mean, listen, if he doesn't win the rural red states, he has no chance.
None. And they don't care. They don't care that their pocketbook's getting hurt by how he does it. They just care that he's punching somebody in the face.
Yeah, exactly. And they believe that he's fighting for them. But you know what? And you see how they held tight, even though the rural economies are getting hurt badly under the Trump tariffs, which, I have my sense of it, because I thought it was badly timed anyway, back in when they put them on, and right when the Brazilian harvest was coming in December, in February, March of 2018. It was terrible. And look at the effects. This had a real effect, by the way, because not only did the Chinese take out ads in the rural areas, talking about how the farmers were going to get hurt by their tariffs and you did have, look at the outcome in the congressional. How many of these communities turned Democratic, on the congressional level. So it does. There is a bite there.
But
Ira, this is Robert Seco. We never spoke. Just want to make sure I let you know I speak German, and you were right about the word debt and guilt. In German, it's one word, Schuld.
Oh, right. Thank you.
By the way, love your underground notes for 2 years.
Thank you. Yeah, no, but thank you. It's the same word, and so talk to us about what's going on in Germany.
So actually, I live in Kansas now. I lived in Germany only for 4 years, so I can't comment too much recently. I left Germany in 2007.
Okay.
But Robert works for agriculture companies.
Oh, great. Well, I want to hear from him because he's got boots on the ground knowledge.
Well, yes, sir. I actually could tell you were spot on. There is several factors in the grain market now. How much people have in a bins? How much did they plant? And successively, the crop insurance is phasing out more plantings. In Kansas, it's too late now to plant the beans. So, unfortunately, it's only anecdotal. I spoke with some farmers in Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, in Iowa, and there is one common factor. I will not comment on all variables because it's complex, but one common factor is people feel uncertain about buying our agricultural equipment like combines, planters. They want to have the grain in a bin, as they say, and count the money first. So I anticipate there may be some delay in purchases this year.
Oh,
and I have a horse. I ride on my own, and I ride through the fields, and the corn looks okay for those people who plant it. But beans, even when they are planted, they looked very miserable. Water flooded it too much, and the plants themselves, they germinated, but they do not look very healthy. And that may have an impact on the crop yields. And you are spot on. That's all
Robert, anecdotally, I was out in Western Illinois for the last 4 days, all the way west by the Mississippi in Galena, and I drove back. I was with a trip of golf. There were 20 of us, and as soon as I finished yesterday, I left so that I could drive. I like to take those drives and eyeball, and it's very anecdotal, but I agree wholeheartedly with you. In fact, I had this discussion this morning with the guy who sits next to me that the beans look miserable in the fields where they are at. And I said, if we get any kind of drought coming into, late July and early August, which isn't unusual following the pattern of so much rain, those beans have no chance. You could see it. Right now, they would start to really be starting to fluffy, and when they would pod out in late July or early August, and the pods are all forming. I don't know that they're going to make it this year. And I'll ask you also a question because I'm in Chicago, so you hear different things. But some people that I talked to who are farmers and are involved with agriculture, they say part of the problem is that the flooding was so bad that a lot of the crops in storage got ruined because there was just so much water all over. And I don't know, can you speak to that? Do you know of that?
That would be only local. Most of the storage areas, I lived in Burlington, Iowa, even 5 miles away from Mississippi. They have this bluff or cliff, and they just have the storages high up. So my company is also, the company I work for is also producing a grain storage bin. So they're usually very prudent where they put them.
Okay.
I could not comment more than that on this.
Great. That's just so. That's where that leaves us, Judge. Anybody else want to thank you, Robert? Again, this is what makes this worthwhile because there's actually really communication, and we hopefully we're all learning from this. So, thank you for your wisdom.
You're welcome. My wisdom is very minuscule compared to you, sir. I just enjoy listening.
Ira, let me read another couple of comments here, and then
sure.
Justice, down here in St. Louis, I see corn doing reasonably well. Haven't seen much soybean planted. One guy has wheat in the field. I don't think I've ever seen wheat in before this time. Wheat in before. Period.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so everybody's kind of seeing the same thing. Again, tomorrow's an important day because we'll get our final intentions, and as Robert talks about, the insurance programs will be factored into this, and we'll find out, but I do know that the Chinese have been increased buyers in May. I haven't seen for June, so I just want to see if it comes that way.
Yeah, I talked to Gruesome yesterday, Ira, and he said that all the big grain guys were all long the wheat and short the beans and corn.
Yeah. Well, the part of the reason for the funds for the grains going up as fast as they did is that the funds were massive shorts. Massive shorts. They were short corn. They were short beans. Of course, with the tariffs and everything else and record crops here, they were right to be, but they got caught, I think, pretty badly here. We'll find out at the end of because this is now quarter, and I warn you, this is quarter end, month end. So tomorrow is month end for all the funds.
And only the closing prices matter.
Yep, that's exact, because they set their books. Now let me bring up another subject that I don't hear much talked about the G20, and it's that AMLO, the president of Mexico, is not going to the G20, which I find fascinating because, and other people have written about it, but not enough. Why would Mexico choose not to go to the G20? They have so much to gain and benefit, especially, with what's going on with China and investment coming in. So I find it interesting. And yet, after I read, and it was absolutely certified that he wasn't going, the peso's it's down now, but it was up yesterday, which kind of surprised me. If anything, I would have been a seller. So it's interesting that one of the key players in all this is not going to the meeting. Now, is it a statement which I believe these are worthless anyway? They're photo ops, and everybody uses them as such, for the folks back home. But I find that fascinating, and I want to see the way Mexico performs. Does he think he can is he becoming like Trump, that he can do things more bilaterally than he can in a group? We'll see, but I was really shocked that he was staying away. I put that out there for food for thought and comment.
Ira, I was going to say the same thing. He didn't want to waste his time with photo ops.
Well, it's a great comment because I can't stand looking. Most of the time these things are ridiculous. If you're waiting, they've just become photo ops. It's great.
He probably figures he's got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, or he says, "You come to me. Let's see who comes. You want to do business? I don't have to go. You come. You'll come here.
Yeah,
you'll come here."
Yeah. That's sort of what I'm thinking.
Okay. I just put it out there because it did catch my attention.
Okay. Well, we got
Robert.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to ask Robert. Yesterday, I asked Robert the question of, is there a lot of corn in storage? And now I just wanted to ask, does that apply to soybeans as well? Is that something that can be stored or no?
Well, Robert's, I don't know where he is.
Oh.
Yeah, you absolutely store beans.
So is there a lot of beans in storage, Ira?
There has been. We call it carryover. The carryover numbers have been huge, but if there's fears about the U.S. crop, those will get drawn down quickly, which is what you see happen when markets go into backwardization.
I would think that farmers being able to get rid of the shit that's in storage would be a good thing.
Well, yes, but they always wait for prices because, like everybody else, they have a built-in sense, well, I'm not selling these, It's like people with a house. Well, I'm not going to sell this for $500,000, and next year it's at $400,000, and you've paid taxes and maintenance. You go, why the fuck didn't sell that for $500,000? Everybody's got to. You can't have yes, I know you have a break-even point, and you factor in all the insurance, but farmers there's a lot of overhead to farming. You got to buy the grain, you got to rent the land or own the land, which if you don't own it outright, you're paying interest on it. You got big machines to buy. There's a lot of lot of upfronts cost in farming, which is how the farm lending sector, where they're always advancing money, and then waiting for the crop to come in. So farmers may have a preconceived notion it's inconceivable to me that medium to large farms, most of them are sophisticated hedgers, but some don't, or they'll hedge 50% of it and let 50% quote unquote ride, in case prices go, and then prices decline and they go, well, hell, it cost me, $7.50 a bushel to plant the beans, and I got my labor, which isn't even factored in. I'm not selling them for 8.25. I'm not selling them for 8, and they hold out and they hold out and they hold out. So, and then they go, well, I'm not selling them at 9.20. I've been holding out. I want my rewards. So, it's not an easy decision. It's always a tough game, and I've listened to the horror stories for 40 years. It taught me a lot. Listening to, I've listened to guys have discussions with, hedgers who were never hedged. It's a consummate thing of the Texas hedge, because they'd be long on the farm and they'd be long in their account.
Right. And some of the farmers are pretty sophisticated guys. I mean, I've talked to smaller guys and they just absolutely, last fall I was in a place in Wisconsin. It's probably some of the best corn in the country. And he's the organic farmer in the area in the Fox River Valley. He just absolutely loathes everything that Trump has done. And he's a Republican. Yeah.
He loves or loathes?
Loathes.
Oh, yeah, because it kills. It has destroyed a lot of, again, what we would call it in the corporate world is goodwill. Yeah. They've got huge money spent developing. How many Chinese trips into Iowa farms? It's like with Khrushchev, when he came to the U.S. and went to the farms back in the late 50s, early 60s. But the Chinese have spent fortunes, in mimicking and buying U.S. ag stuff. I'm kind of surprised, that's why I watched the ag stocks, because I'm amazed that the Chinese haven't tried to make a move. They'd probably be blocked, but it'd be interesting, because they always need, and Michael absolutely confirms it, to secure a source of food. They cannot be without food. You think Hong Kong looks bad with 2 million people in the streets?
Don't feed them.
Yeah. Don't feed them. Yeah, that's exactly right. Then you'll see what political uprising is all about, and they cannot. It's just not. No way. So we'll watch this. But this is anything else we want to cover? The dollar looks when it slipped under that 200-day. It's across the board. It looks like it has problems, and it should have problems. It's amazing. Again, it's doing it, and it still offers the best returns of any developed economy, but it's definitely now shown itself that it's prone to a pretty good correction here, and a lot of people again were off base. We're off sides on this trade, going on. Dollar's just going to go up. It's amazing how nobody remembers what Goldman puts out 2 days ago, but when they change their tune, everybody remembers it without telling them that they changed their tune. So I kind of go, wow, that's marketing.
Well, here's another comment from Mike. He said, would you think of the negative yields as a precursor to the proponents of MMT as a way to test it, as well as a way to create inflation, as well as to avoid the deflation the Fed is so scared of?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, yes, that they would use the negative yields, not necessarily in the U.S. at this point yet, but that's what they're doing, because it's, really, it's what they're doing. They're ultimately doing that, the ability to print, and they're telling you that, because when your debt becomes negative anyway, what's different unless you create that inflation? And the conceptual term is, you know, and they throw it around. It's getting, Peter Bookvar has actually been very good with this. You know, the concept of pushing on a string. And I don't know, I've read a lot about this in my academic studies when I thought I wanted to be a PhD, but I thought better quickly. Thanks. Thank you. Good decision. But the term was really coined by my favorite economist, Joseph Schumpeter, back when he was diarying keeping his diary of the Great Depression, and the concept of pushing on a string is, look at, he said this: you can lower interest rates to zero, and if the economic outlook is not positive, you can't get. And he loved people. He loved entrepreneurs. Joseph Schumpeter loved entrepreneurs and their what Keynes called their animal instincts, because he felt that was what was really important for driving a capitalist economy. And if things look so bad, I'm not going to borrow money at 50 basis points, because if I can't generate enough return on my capital, why am I going to borrow money at all? I'm not. And that seems to be what is the central bank's concern, you know. And you hear them keep playing with it and dancing around, but it's pushing on a string that I don't need to borrow money, or corporations who are flush with funds, I don't need to borrow money. I don't need it. So they keep lowering rates and they're not getting it. And all you're doing is having the people who are the least credible borrowers borrowing. Now, they're not getting it at 2%. They're still paying 6, 7, 8%. Go ahead, go buy a car, you know, with a FICO score in the 600s. You're not paying 3%. You're paying more. So it's not, but they're paying a lot less than they would have. So they're in effect wind up borrowing more. But you can, we've already seen. Look at the European economy, negative interest rates. How's that doing? They're not. They can't even get growth over 1.2, 1.3%. Japan, same thing. So again, if the entrepreneurial spirits are diminished and they're worried about demand going forward, and there's so much capacity, you know, that's really what people worry when they talk about China. It's the excess capacity that China built up, you know, that has kept prices on, that has kept pressure on price, downward pressure on prices for the last 25 years. There's just so much capacity. And that's what the Fed models fail to really take into account. That's why I've maintained that they're flawed for so long, and especially its effect on labor. It's just not happening, and you're not getting it. And yet they're geared to that dual mandate, which I find a ridiculous concept anyway when you really flush through it. But I know, as Paul would say, but that's my mandate. I have to perform to something. That's what I'm performing to. Great. So, Michael, yes, negative rates are MMT, but so is supply side economics as far as I'm concerned, taking on as much debt, you know, and we know it, cut taxes, fiscal stimulus grows, and we'll grow our way out of it. I think they're really opposite sides of the same coin, but I view MMT as far more dangerous, because the view that debt doesn't matter, sorry, I'll just never get there, because the history of the world to me, sorry, Mel Brooks, is that debt matters quite a bit. That the history of bad things is always revolves around debt.
Okay, guys, any other questions or any other topics you'd like to talk about this morning?
Come on. Well, we don't want to talk about Kashkari and.
Oh, you mean cash and carry? Cash
and carry. That's what I call him too. Cash and carry. Listen. The guy ran for governor of California, right?
Yeah.
Do you think he's a political animal? Do you think he's using his seat as the Minneapolis Fed president as a political? Of course. Bullard. Yeah, he's got his eye, and now Trump is talking about making him a governor. But at least I give James Bullard credit, because he voted. He voted what he thought was the right thing to do. This concept of consensus at the Fed, I find repugnant, but I'm not a fan of consensus anything, because I don't know who said it, but it was a great quote. Consensus is the hiding place of cowards.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but when he was running for governor, they got a picture of him posing or making like a homeless person, like he spent a couple days out on the street.
Oh yeah, no, I never remember that.
Yeah, I just saw a picture of it yesterday from a few years ago. But you're right. Yeah, that's the kind of person he is.
Yeah, he's got his eye on bigger things for Alex Kashkari. Listen, he's got enough money, and now he's just playing. And there's a lot of politics. And once they play politics, don't forget there's other people sitting in that room who have plenty of politics too. Lael Brainerd, she gave to Hillary Clinton's campaign. You don't think she's political? Of course. So yeah, this really gets interesting.
I saw a great interview the other night on Axios with the governor of California.
I'm sorry, who was that?
It was on Axios. It's an HBO political interview show.
Yeah.
And the guy is he's basically a fairly right-wing Republican.
Yeah.
And so he interviewed the governor of California, and it was fabulous. This guy's brilliant and a great speaker.
I'll have to go look at it, because I always like when people have opposite tracks. It's like when Tucker Carlson interviewed Elizabeth Warren. I'm going to tell you this. I respect Elizabeth Warren when it comes to finance. She's absolutely, and I believe this for 10 years, because people say, you like Elizabeth Warren? I say, yeah, when she sticks to her knitting. I don't like her social issues. But when she talks about economic issues and financial issues, pay attention, because she knows what she's talking about. She's researched this stuff, and she's very bright. And she's actually, as I wrote that blog about probably 2 weeks ago already. I'm a little cloudy, but she's going to push Trump, because I think that Trump is paying more attention to Elizabeth Warren and her economic views than anybody else, and she's not afraid to put out there. It's a little wonky. It's a lot wonky, but she's right on a lot of things. Do not fall asleep with her, and she is pushing Trump. And believe me, Trump's comment yesterday about that he'd like to have Draghi as the head of the Fed.
That was pretty funny.
That was funny. You know what? I don't know where I'd be moving, but I'd be getting out of here somewhere. Well, wait, first I had to buy a lot of gold, but I mean, come on. I'm surprised.
Ira, you should have gold coming out your ears by now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, just because the last week was a terrible week for me, because I lost a brother-in-law and I just got sidetracked. And that's not an excuse. I just had my mind, I had to fly to Dallas, and I was dealing with a lot of family issues. It was just a hard week.
Family's getting in the way of you being really rich, because your daughter's wedding cost you the whole short and the S&Ps in 2018.
You're right. You get family issues. It's not. And it's not like the old days where I had people, who I could leave positions with. I can't, and I'm just not. So it's like my wife looks at me, she says, "You can't be sidetracked." I said, "I know," and yet after the after the service on Wednesday, I was in the car with my wife, and I hooked up my computer, and with my hotspot, I was able to listen to Powell, which was just preposterous. But that press conference honestly went exactly what we had discussed. The statement was a little bit hawkish, I thought, the statement itself, but the press conference was so friggin' dovish, as he just threw everything out there. He's got to be careful, because his credibility is getting really deemed suspect. But that's part of the reason that gold is going up. And if you watch the gold from that day, from that press conference, because it closed, the pit close that day was 1348, and it got up to about 1370 during the press conference, and came back to about 1361, and then Thursday and Friday just took off right out of there. So
they started in on that at 4 minutes to 3, Ira. And somebody came in, we were trading around because Pax had just said he was lamenting about getting taken out of some of his runners because he was traveling. And about 4 minutes to 3 o'clock, somebody came in and they started buying the futures and it never stopped. And they ran the stops at that between 4 and 5 o'clock going into that Asia dead zone.
Right. So Pax is absolutely confirming everything that I saw, and it ran so hard. I was trying to get back into I couldn't. I had orders, and I just never got them filled. As I always tell you, I use wish orders, and I put some in, but it just you know what, and I had to lament it and go, okay, you know what, and again, silver has badly underperformed here, which is one of the issues that again keeps this rally from really getting full tilt boogie. But maybe Bitcoin is the new silver. I don't know. You know, everybody, it's just too young to make any type of decision. But we got all kinds of stuff going on. But last week everything actually came into sync, and we saw movements. More importantly, on the I almost said Draghi, but I mean the Powell press conference, was that the steepeners took hold too. You know, the 210 steepened, the 530 steepened, they steepened. So they read him exactly right. Now they're back to wondering, you know, because some people are walking them back. And of course, if you get a deal out of the G20, the stock market's going to rally, and therefore the bonds it'll relieve some of the upside pressure on the bonds. I'm not sure that that's right, but we'll see. You know, again, I'm shifting my duration as short as possible. I wouldn't buy a 30-year buy. I mean, you can buy them as a trade, but if you're putting stuff in your portfolio in your retirement plan, 5s, 10s, and 30s would not be in my plan. I can tell you that. Just for and Mike, yeah.
No, I was going to say I own them, right?
Yeah.
And I have since August and September.
Right.
But they're a trade. They're not
exactly. Exactly, and they're a great trade. Although I would argue that the twos over the last 2 months have been a better trade, but we're arguing semantics.
Yeah, I mean, I'm long both.
Yeah, no,
you know? Sure.
And treat them as a trade, meaning that hey, I get enough capital appreciation out of them. Bye bye. What else? What else could I have done? You know, they've been great. They have been great. What's
going back to Powell, right? Yep. A lot of people, I'm not sure a lot of people realize he's a creature of private equity, number one. Mm-hmm. Okay. So he definitely understands credit, high yield, and how markets work. So his pivot in January really didn't, it was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise.
You never want to touch me.
Are you excited? And you just
I get there's a difference between cuddling with me and asking me every freaking day.
Who's ever in there, you got to mute yourself. Yo, mute yourself, please.
He's taking all the spark out of the bedroom, Pooh.
All right.
Oh, Lord. Let's find out who that is and mute him.
I don't know. I just muted everybody. Ira, unmute yourself again. Let me see if I can find you. I'll unmute you.
All right, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Jeez. Okay. Angelo, unmute yourself. You guys get back into that conversation.
Yeah, something about the bedroom. I don't know. No. So Powell is a creature of private equity, so he understands high yield, how markets work. So his pivot in January was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise. When he's done at the Fed, it would not surprise me if he goes back to Carlisle, right?
Oh yeah.
Now,
not at all.
And so I think because of his background, he's going to be more prone to be light on his feet than any of his predecessors, which had no capital market experience whatsoever, right? So they would just sit there, correct me if I'm wrong, right, and watch, until the Fed governors saw the whites of the enemy's eyes, and then they would make a move. Powell is not of that ilk, it seems to me, right?
You know, Angela, that's a very good point, and On the other hand, yeah, he understands though about, is he blowing a bond bubble that is pushing the equities to not, I would never, I don't think the equities are near at all any type of bubble, but their valuations are stretched because of bond valuations. And there's, you know, Santelli's Tina, there is no alternative. And that's right. And he has to wear that. And I think that was his initial reaction, which is why in December he was willing to go higher. And again, you know, when they talked about quantitative tightening, remember it was on automatic pilot. That was the key phrase in December. Automatic pilot.
Yes.
And all of a sudden that got taken out of the equation. And he may have responded quickly to other global concerns, and they are global concerns, which is why I find that dual mandate just a friggin' joke.
Yeah.
And Richard
he responded quickly. I mean, he responded quickly because David Rubenstein tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, dude, I don't know if you realize it or not, but high yield spreads just blew out, and not a single bond has traded in 40 days.
Yeah, our other man who's not in the room, basically, he was talking about the same thing a few weeks ago when we were on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'd hate to think, well, listen, there is FISOC, which is the Financial Stability Oversight Committee that that is chaired by Mnuchin, but Powell's certainly there, and it's made up of public and private actors in the financial world. And then, of course, there's the G30, which I believe that Powell, this G30 should be enough to make anybody crazy. When you go look, and again, I always stress this, go look to see who's a member of it and what gets discussed there. So your point, Anna, is certainly well taken. You know, who talks to whom, how do they talk? You know, we don't know. We don't know,
No.
It's certainly possible that he got enough feedback from people that he knows in the industry, not just the finance, but the broad industry. You know, that includes CEOs of major corporations who are telling them that, hey, slow down here because, you know, and as Druckenmiller so astutely said, the Fed's double shotgun approach was a disaster. And then all of a sudden, you know, that was quantitative tightening combined with Fed funds. But, you know, I had discussed that with Santelli. You know, this was an either or. You needed to choose your weapon, but you had Yellen who said, you know, quantitative tightening was going to be like watching paint dry. But that's what their models told them. But their models are the one thing we are certain about the Fed is that their models are flawed. I'm not going to say wrong. They're flawed. So they come up with terrible. Yeah, really, is anybody? I can't stand that the market trades on the dot plots. People who have never forecasted correctly are now forecasting through their dot plots, and you're paying attention to that. God bless you all, and good night.
I mean, I don't know how we get out of this science experiment gone wrong. We're going to have pain somewhere, somehow. I mean, there's no other way.
That's the key. That's the key. And we live in a world, starting with Alan Greenspan, where all of a sudden central bankers have attained the pedestal, and they've gladly climbed up on the pedestal. Well, I listen to people, you know, I don't have to, this room will certainly know how I feel about Mario Draghi. And when I have to read all these, you know, columns and listen to people talk, what a great guy, you know, I'm gagging. I'm gagging. But these are the same people that when Neville Chamberlain came back from Munich in 1938 and said, peace in our time, they were applauding Neville Chamberlain, and anybody who warned differently was considered a demon. Mario Draghi has created a Frankenstein for Europe. And the only way out is if Germany acquiesces to everything that has been put on its back and says, okay, we accept this role, and we will bail, and we will create a transfer union. Mark that phrase down, transfer union, because it's the key to all of Europe. And if Germany is willing to transfer its wealth to support, I would say, 80% of the other countries, okay, then the EU exists. But if the German electorate says, no, we're not doing that, and we don't believe what you're telling us, that we've only benefited because we've had a weak euro, low interest rates, and been part of this whole common market, that's not the only reason. We would have done this regardless, and you know it. So why are we paying to support it? Because that's the existential question where this all goes.
Ira, try this one on for size.
Uh-oh.
You know how you've been saying, what will Germany want in exchange for agreeing to something along the lines of a Eurobond, right?
Right.
What if Germany says, okay, EU, fine, we'll agree to that, but we also want the right to negotiate our own trade deals in order to build up the German credit card and give you idiots more money?
Well, then you may as well end it all. Then the facade has been broken. Then the facade has been broken, and investors will run for cover.
And give France the bird.
Well, I'm telling you right now, the French-German bond differential, I'm talking about 10 years, is into about 32 basis points. I would buy German bonds and sell French bonds with two hands.
And I got to tell you, if Europe were to break up, I think Italy does a hell of a lot better than France does.
Oh God, yes. And believe me, the French.
I think Italy has a much better economy than
better industrial base. The
yes.
French would say no chance, but they fear the Italians. That's why they force the Italians in, because if they existed outside with their own currency, France was the most vulnerable place with their work rules and their regulations and a disaster. France could not operate with Italy outside of the EU. No how, no way. We saw it in the 90s when Italy dropped out and the lira devalued, and the fashion industry and other industries were moving from Paris to Milan.
I mean, I give the French credit. They did a masterful job of coming up with the idea of the hoax, implementing the hoax, and getting it to work for a while.
Well, listen, if you're French, do you want to go to war with Germany again? That hasn't been a very good proposition for the last, let's see, 148 years, because I'm going back to 1871.
You don't think at this point Europe is beyond that?
Oh, I would hope so. But you know what? Even Helmut Kohl and Mitterrand said it. So I'm not. Mitterrand told the French people, let's go back to the Maastricht vote when they voted all the Stability and Growth Pact in. You know, and France had a vote. Germany never had a vote, by the way. It was done in the Bundestag. Was not done by a popular vote. France held a referendum. Do you know what the results of that referendum was to put this whole thing into place with the ECB and everything else? You know what that vote was? Yeah, it's amazing that with Brexit, nobody talks about this. I'll tell you, it was 50.2% to 49.8%.
Oh, that's right.
So it wasn't widely accepted, and that's with Mitterrand, who was a powerful force in French politics, on the block, you know, stumping for this. And he told the French people that if you don't approve this, that there's the possibility of war again in Europe. Because don't forget, the unification has already taken place. East and West Germany have been reunified. The Maastricht vote doesn't come until 91 or early 92. And Mitterrand was on about telling the French people that, so much so that Helmut Kohl made Mitterrand apologize to the German people. Again,
but that was 1991, and this is 2019.
Oh, that's right. And the Chinese don't remember the Boxer Rebellion or the Opium War. So
it's a mess. It's a mess.
It is a mess, and yet markets go up because it's the levitation of cheap money until it, again, Herb Stein. How it can go on until it can go on no longer. But that's what we look for, and that's what we're here for. I'd love for it to all go away and be the world scene, but the more the established elites have created, and I hate that phrase because it makes it sound conspiratorial, but it's just the way that they look at the world and operate the world, and this is the sustenance of it. But there are cracks now. There's cracks. Trump is a result of the cracks in the edifice. The world has changed dramatically. In fact, there's a really good column that somebody sent me today in the New York Times by Robert Kaplan, who's one of the better analysts out there. I'm sorry that he works at your Asia group now. I just noticed that. But he has a good piece today on the importance of the issue of Iran is really China. And he details out why. And it's actually a very good piece worth reading. There are a lot of moving parts. It's never as simple. And that's, that's why I still work at this, because it's never as simple as people want to believe. Everyone was, and algorithms, we saw it yesterday or 2 days ago when that Mnuchin comment came out, and it made my point. I actually enjoyed reading about it because he used words, but that was all old news, but the algorithms made it seem like it was brand new. And the markets moved, you got a big boost in the stock market that day, and then it fell late. I was on Monday. Or Tuesday, whatever day Tuesday the market fell. But it was all based on that Mnuchin comments, which were old, and then when you parse the words, it was far different. So it makes my case. Was it done intentionally? Don't know. But it's interesting to watch it. Everybody wants to simplify. And I love simplifying my trading, but the world right now is just too fraught with so many different, as I call, prairie fire potentials. And there's a lot of sparks out there. So as Mao would warn, it only takes a single spark to start a prairie fire. And
start hoarding your gold while it's cheap.
There's a lot of tinder. And I'm not a gold bug. I've never been a gold bug. It goes up, it goes down. I know that. But I look at what's making it go up, and it's not wars. Again, I will stress you can trade gold from the bull side on breakout of any type of conflict, but don't stay too long.
Well, the perfect example of that was the night of the first Iranian strikes. And
right.
Yeah, it was up. It had a big range. It went up to, it had a $30 break, and then it held, and then it came back. It did the same. It did the same thing, and I remember it when Sadat got shot. I bought 20 contracts. I was up $80,000. I bought some halfway back, and 5 seconds later, I was even.
Yeah, remember what happened to the Deutschmark that day? I do. 1981. I remember it was like yesterday.
Why, did you lose money?
No, I made a lot of money, but it was what the market did. And the stops got hit. That was a infamous day. Trust me. What went on, and I still think that there's bad feelings between people from that day from what went on in the pit. Honestly, it was insanity. I think we went from limit up to limit down in the Deutschmark as fast as I've ever seen anything.
Yeah, guys were and in those days, there were limits.
Yeah.
So it just didn't freely trade. Or I don't even know if I can get it back this far to even show everybody, but I'm working on it.
Okay. I don't know. Anybody else have anything? As we head into the G20 and month end, quarter end, so.
Buy stocks, baby.
You know what? And I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you what. I have a small position, so I don't really care right now. But I'm watching the way the peso responds to all this, because with AMLO again not being there, I'm amazed that the peso can hold up here at all. I'm amazed.
Yeah, here's the day right here. Was it August, the first week in August?
Well, I don't know. Check. You can check on somebody Google up when Sadat was shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was like the first week in August. It looks like August 10th, 81. It was where they had a big range in the D market, went limit up, limit down.
Let me see. Let me see. Let's see. It's not so easy to find today. October 6, 1981.
October. Okay, so here it is here. That's a weekly.
What was the limit then, Ira?
I'm in 81. I'm gonna maybe think 75 points. We doubled them to 150, and then the limits eventually came off. But it was, I think, originally 75 ticks.
So limit up, and then next trade limit down, or did it trade in between?
Oh, it trade. You know, there was a lot of trades were inserted. I guarantee.
I guess that's, I already understood that by the hard 2019.
Bunch of crooks.
Oh yeah. You have no idea.
You had no idea what was going on then.
Especially because of the incompetence of order fillers. Oh God. You know, you're standing there, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, and whoa. You know, most guys are
buy the book, sell the book, sell everything at limit.
Sell everything down to the limit.
And everybody's trying to cover them in the bank market, which was illegal at the time.
Wait, not for me. I was an arbitrager.
Oh boy.
You guys got loopholes for everything.
It's America, my man. You better have loopholes.
Talk about loopholes.
All right, then we shouldn't be bitching when we see the markets move 15 seconds before a Trump tweet comes out.
Well, I bitch, but I certainly understand the game. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to bitch.
We're not the insiders anymore, Angelo.
Wait, say that again?
We're bitching because we're not the insiders anymore.
Oh, poor babies.
Yeah. I'm not really bitching. I understand the jungle in which I live.
That still happens.
Oh, yeah. Now it's just machine oriented. I liked when there was a human face to it. It's tough to swear at a machine. It's easy to swear at a human being.
Yeah, and it's easier to go up to a human being and demand part of the trade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now it's lost in the ether world, and you know what? You get nothing, and you enjoy it.
I like it. Yeah.
You'll get nothing, and you'll enjoy it. Sorry, the money's carted off elsewhere. Where were you? I was trading. I had an order there. Unbelievable. But that, yeah. So these days, but wars are, again, everybody says, well, and they come out on the media, there's tension there, buy gold. I'm telling you, I have so many whip marks on my back from the scars inflicted upon thinking that was about it. No, but here you saw it. Now that the Fed has been cornered by the BOJ and the ECB, which they've done, you've seen gold finally take off. There's not heightened tensions with Iran. Not right, not any more than usual. So, and yet gold has sustained itself, and it all goes back to last Wednesday, with the Powell press conference. Because he was truly cornered by Mario Draghi. What Draghi said on the previous day, which he knew fully well what was going to happen, because he wanted to corner him, because it's tough for him to exist in that arena. And we've talked about this quite a bit here. I am convinced that it's going to be Wiedmann to head the ECB, and that's why Draghi made that speech and said what he was going to do, because he's trying to paint Wiedmann into a corner where he can't escape, because that's Draghi's goal now.
I mean, nobody's raising rates. I mean, the Bank of England left rates unchanged, what, at 75 basis points? And I can't remember what the Bank of New Zealand did the other day, or Australia. I think they were unchanged.
They held, yeah. But I'm going to tell you what, and it's good. It's a good point you bring up. Look at the Aussie Kiwi cross, because Australia, which is indicative of China, because Aussie is certainly more dependent upon China, but that cross is moving down, even with the statement out of the RBNZ was fairly dovish, without them doing anything. But this cross is coming down to 3-month lows anyway. I'm wondering if we can get under that 102.75 made in March, because then you'll see, regardless of what the Aussies do, the New Zealanders will cut. That is probably more indicative of what's going on in that part of the world, that cross, as to what the banking intentions are, because they're a race to the bottom. That's why, everybody who says, oh, we don't manipulate our current, manipulation is an interesting word.
Ira, what does New Zealand have, economically speaking, that Australia does not?
Dairy and beef.
Dairy?
Dairy, yeah. They to Asia, they're huge, dried powdered milk, sheep's milk. They have a lot of agriculture. And you know what? They have a booming tourist industry. And a lot of people have resettled there. They like it. And they've got some industry. Nothing. Australia is much, of course, mineral rich. They have agriculture too, but they have some manufacturing, and they too have, great tourism. But they have more as far as economic activity in a manufacturing sense than New Zealand does. But New Zealand's a huge agricultural center for Asia. You go look them up, and they have Jack Schulte too. So. It's a combination.
Yeah, there you go. And yeah.
Jack runs a. What is he? What is Jack Schulte?
A hunting outfit, doesn't he?
Yeah, but he also gives air. He's a pilot, so he has a. He gives air tours.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best trips I ever had was down there doing. You got on the old Grumman Gooses, right in Auckland downtown. And the guy would fly like 100 feet over the deck all the way up the Bay of Islands and drop you in. Awesome.
Yeah. And Jack I like Jack, and I like his brother Mark. May rest in peace. Good guy. Who just died, I think, within the last year, 2 years. I know it was fairly recently. I mean, that's where we lie. If you have more, if you think of questions, I'll come back on tomorrow, because with the June 30th, it's going to be June 28th, last day of the month for trading. And going into G7, we'll probably hear some leak stuff coming out, because they're already worked on this stuff, this so-called Sherpas. We'll see what we see, but I'll come back tomorrow. But I'm going to be pay attention to the ag. And again, with the 11 o'clock release tomorrow of plantings and storage, we might get some movement. It'll make it interesting. But
I'll come up with some buy levels tonight for that. I mean, I've already got them in mind, but you definitely want to buy a hard break.
Yeah. All right. Anything else before I hang up?
Thanks, Ira. All I'm going to say is I'm keeping my eye on the Asian periphery, because
yes,
if there's going to be any kind of trade thing, right, somebody's going to know something in Asia. You're
a smart man. Or you may be LGTB, maybe, I don't know. I shouldn't use, I can't use gender anymore. You're a smart person. You're a smart person.
Ira, he only does that Friday mornings before he goes.
Okay. Hey, you know what? It's a big world out there. We all find our own way, don't we? Okay. All right. Anything else, Judd? You can send me questions. I'll be around.
See ya.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Okay.